Greetings programs, this is TRON FAQ. You've probably seen me on the various TRON sites answering people's questions, and I've created a TRON unofficial FAQ which you can find at the address livingdead.g2gm.net/TRON-FAQ. I've also created a program called Res Handler which helps to get around the res file limit for custom maps in the TRON 2.0 game. And I've also created a couple of maps so far. One's called Death Trap for light cycles, and the other one is Capture the Bit for Team DRes. This video tutorial is just going to cover the basics of making your first map, be it light cycles or deathmatch or DRes. I'm not going to cover Disc Arena or single player because those are quite a bit more complicated, so I'll just stick to light cycles and deathmatch for this tutorial. Okay, so the first thing you need to do before you can even begin is to get the TRON editing tools. So if you visit my FAQ and go to the editing section, number 10, and then 10.1 editing tools, click on that, and then you'll see right at the top here there's a link to the tools. So you just click on that and it'll start downloading the tools. After you've downloaded the tools, you'll need to extract and install them. So I've already got the tools here sitting in a folder on my hard drive. So I just click on the file, on the zip file, and my program opens up here, and I'll just extract the files now. Okay, so now I have the tools folder here, and inside you'll find a sample maps folder which has sample maps and prefabs inside this res file here, and then this is all the tool files, and this is the documentation for the tools. So after you've extracted the tool files, what you would do is you just highlight all the files, cut, and then paste wherever you've got your TRON game directory. In my case, I've got it in a custom location, but if you just use the default install directory, it would be C program files, Buena Vista Interactive, TRON 2.0. So you would just cut and then browse to that location and then paste in that directory. And again, in my case, I don't have it in the default location, so I'd have to go here and then paste, but I've already got all the files there anyways, so I'm not going to bother cutting and pasting. After you've pasted the editing tools into your TRON 2.0 game directory, which is probably C program files, Buena Vista Interactive, TRON 2.0, the next thing you need to do is to download a batch file that I created. On the editing tools page that we looked at earlier, if you scroll down, you'll see a link lower down here called TRON Tools Setup version 1.3.bat. You want to download this batch file and then cut and paste it into the TRON 2.0 tools folder that is now there. Since you cut and pasted the tool files into your TRON 2.0 game directory, now you cut and paste this batch file into that directory. So wherever you've downloaded it onto your hard drive, cut it and then paste it in here. And as you can see, I've got the batch file right here. You might want to delete the lithres.bat file that's mentioned in the documentation because, as I said before, it's not very good. Don't use it, it'll cause you problems. Use this batch file instead that I've created. So the next thing you want to do is run the batch file, but before you do that, make sure you have plenty of hard drive space available. Wherever you've got the game installed, whichever partition, C, or whichever drive you put it on, make sure you've got like at least 2.5 gigs free, because what's going to happen is all the files that come with the game, the res files, are basically almost like zip files in a sense. They contain files within them. So these files are actually like containers for other files, like for the textures, the sounds, and so on. So when you run this batch file, what it does is it runs a program called lithres.exe that's in the tools folder, and it extracts all the files within those res files. It extracts the texture, sounds, etc., etc. So all this stuff is going to end up in a new folder in your TRON 2.0 game directory called Game. So you'll now have a new folder called Game. And then once the batch file is done running, let it do its thing. It's going to take a while. It's probably going to take like 5 minutes or something like that. And then once it's done, you go inside the game folder and you'll have all these new folders and files and stuff. And this is the stuff that DEdit, which is the map editor for TRON 2.0, it needs these files to work. If you don't have all these files extracted from the res files that the game uses, then the editor just will not work. So you need all these files on your hard drive. Oh, one important thing before I forget, you need to install the latest patch before you start all this, before you start using the batch to extract files. So if you go to my FAQ and go to the troubleshooting section, number 9, and click on 9.2, released game patches, make sure that you download the latest patch, version 1.042, and run the patch, install it, and let it update your game TRON 2.0 to the latest version before you start extracting all those files, or else you're not going to be up to date. You're not going to have everything you need. So in this case here on the release game patches page, I would recommend that you use this link here, this one, tron-update version 1.042 C for complete, ENG for English, .exe. This is an unofficial patch that was created to improve upon the official patch that was released by Buena Vista Games. This unofficial patch has a lot of benefits. For example, it'll allow you to use more res files than the official patch will. The official patch only allows you to use 6 res files, or 6 maps, if you want to put it that way, custom maps, while this one will more than double it. It'll allow 13 res files. So that reason alone is worth getting this patch. So download this patch and run it and let it install and update your game. Then you can go and use the batch file to extract all the game files you'll need to run the DEdit map editor. Okay, so once all of that is done, which will take quite a while, then you go back to the tools folder inside your TRON 2.0 game directory and you run DEdit. So you click on DEdit and it'll load up. Once DEdit is running, the first thing you should do is go to the Edit menu and choose Options. Then click on the Run tab. What you need to do is make sure that these 3 lines here, these 3 fields, are correct for you. So for example, on the first line here, executable, this shows where the LithTech game engine is. In other words, where your TRON 2.0 game executable is. Now, in my case, I left it as is, as a default, and it worked for me. But it might not work for you. So what you need to do is click on this Browse button here, and then use it to browse to the lithtech.exe executable file, which is the TRON 2.0 game executable. So just click on it, and what'll happen is it'll specify exactly where lithtech.exe is. So in my case it's DTRON 2.0 lithtech.exe. It'll probably be different for you. Most likely it'll be C program files, Buena Vista Interactive, TRON 2.0 lithtech.exe. So, and then for the working directory, again, I was able to leave it at the default, which is ... here, which means take the current application directory and move up one level. But again, it might not work for you. So what you can do then is just take the first line here and copy the path that leads to lithtech.exe. So copy whatever is in front of lithtech.exe. So right click, copy, then delete the two dots and paste what you copied. So now the working directory is specified as, in my case, D TRON 2.0, and in your case it'll be, C program files, blah blah blah. So that is where you need the working directory field to point to in order to make sure that DEdit is working properly. If you don't do this, you're going to run into problems like, for example, you'll have textures missing when you run your map, when you test it in DEdit. All your geometry will have no textures on it. It will look like gray or whatever and look terrible. So make sure that this is correct. And if you don't change the executable field, you'll probably get like an error saying that your cshell.dll file is missing and all that. So as long as these two fields point to where they need to point to, that they're correct, you won't run into these problems. You won't get these errors. And for the last line here, it'll probably read as it shows in my case. If not, make sure that it does. It needs to read what it shows here. And the program arguments are -res space engine.res space -res space game, which is the game folder where all the assets are located, the textures and so on, space plus run world space quote %, world name %, quote. So if you've got all this here, you're fine, you're set. The editor, DEdit, will run properly and you won't run into problems. If all that's set up correctly now, the next step is to go to the File menu, click Open Project, and then browse to this game folder that's been created. So we're in the TRON 2.0 directory now. We go inside Game, and we look for a file called tron.dep. So we open this file. And once we've opened this file, DEdit is now ready to make maps. You can start editing and making maps now. So finally, let's go back to File again. And now we click New World. So we click on that. And now it's asking for a name. So we're going to type in a name for our map, and we can call it whatever we want. Like test, for example. That's usually what you use, right? So click OK. Oh yeah, usually what you should do is pick the folder where you want your map stored. Because I didn't specify one, it's asking me where do you want the map to be put. And I'm just going to say OK to this. It's going to use the folder world, so I'll click OK. So what's happening is that in the game folder, there's another folder called worlds. And if you go inside that folder, there's even more folders. As you can see, if I click on this plus here beside the worlds folder, it'll show all the folders within it, the subfolders, and there are 3 subfolders within it. One's called Retail Lifecycle, one's called Retail Multiplayer, and one's called Retail Single Player. Now, you might want to click on one of these before you go and choose New World, and then it'll know where to put your map. But the thing with that is that there's already maps in these folders from the game, and if you choose to put your map in there in one of these folders, it'll get mixed in with all the maps that came from the game, so then you're going to have a hard time finding your map later. So I would just put it in the worlds folder for now. You can always move it later wherever you need to move it. So now that it's in the worlds folder, you'll have a much easier time of finding it if you ever need to find it again in DEdit in this pane down here. So finally, we're ready to make a map now. So let's begin.